for all to see. The signs we've lost our way. When we jail our heroes and applaud our villains and turn our hearts away. Like a silent choir, too scared to sing the anthem of a braver day. The ballad of Dr. Bruce Paix.
Hey, there he is. There's
Here we are.
Dr. Bruce Paix. This is episode 80, Bruce. Well, you're kicking along. We've gone past episode 26 a little while ago.
I'm glad you said 80 because I was having a little panic that I might have put the wrong number on it, but yeah, I reckon it's 80 as well.
It is 80, and we were heading to 26, then we were heading to 52, and we're still going. We thought, we'll see how we go, but we're still getting people joining and watching, and a few thousand views on Cafe Lockdown, and many more across many other platforms. And then we break it up and put some little shorts out, and some of them are getting a stack on different platforms. And nice to see. I think Rosie's and SE Gren were on very early. Valerie's on. So it looks like we're broadcasting, which is good to see. That's always a good thing, Bruce, is that when we're doing this sort of stuff and we're going live, to make sure that the platforms are kicking along well too. So thank you for all you on the ball people that are watching and chucking notes in there to let us know that things are firing. X is usually the one that's a little bit lagging behind, but Facebook and the Rumbles seem like they're going okay there, Bruce.
Yep, all good.
Yeah, and you've been well. We've got a bit of rain around. We've had a bit of wind and rain here. It's almost gone back to winter weather here in Adelaide, down my way, down the Fleurieu Peninsula and other parts of Adelaide.
Same here. I packed the fire away just a tiny bit early, I think, but I did.
Yeah, funny about that. Anyway, it is what it is. That is Australia, eh? What is it? The land of floods and drought and all that sort of stuff, and 4 seasons in one day in Adelaide, at least. Anyway, and there in the hinterland there in the Victorian sort of countryside where you are.
Well, remember what Dorothea McKellar said, a land of droughts and climate change.
I think you got it mixed up with what's his name? Our old mate that we always, Flannery. I think that was Flannery's kind of re-attempt at that, wasn't it? Climate change and no full dams or something like that, wasn't it? But anyway. I wanted to just keep. There's not a lot from me today, to be honest. I'm going to kick into your stuff a bit earlier, but I did want to give a plug because we do get quite a bit of a following on obviously Cafe Locked Out and the Rumble channel, and Michael and the community there obviously trying to do so much to get information out. A lot of podcasts has been put out there on the Cafe Locked Out community, and so then obviously Cafe Locked Out's got a website as well, and Michael's working on different things, and I've got to be a bit slack, Michael. I know that you talked to me the other week about affiliate links, and we've got the store and all that sort of stuff. But they have got a little store there. You get on their website, cafelockedout.com, and you can scroll down there, check out all things, all videos and stuff like that. We're even on there. Look at that, Bruce. Eh? So we're on the website there and lots of others. But if you click on the clothes, caps and stickers, and again, it's designed kind of in a way where people in the community can buy stuff, support Cafe Locked Out, and it's meant to work that podcasters like us give it a bit of a plug. There's meant to be an affiliate link, which I haven't set up yet because, as I said, I'm a bit slack. But if people want to jump on there and support the Cafe Locked Out community, the people that are doing stuff there, and then we're meant to kind of get a little bit of a bonus from that with an affiliate link. But anyway, it's there anyway for people to check out. I wanted to give it a bit of a plug before kind of get into it. There's some wares there, the little blue bees, and Bruce and I were only just talking about that. Actually, we were thinking, Bruce and I, that Bruce has had a little bit of an accident with his laptop and decided to fry it with a bit of musket one day, and so he had to buy himself a new laptop. And there was a little bit of a joke from the community about him getting maybe a sippy cup. So look, at the end of the day, if people there's a bit of a concept idea if someone wants to jump on maybe from the Blue Bee community and create create a sippy cup, a Bruce Paix musket sippy cup, and we were sort of saying that maybe it may end up being a bestseller. I'm just be interested to see how many people would actually get behind it, Bruce. You know, your Blue Bee, Bruce Paix, Cafe Locked Out musket sippy cup. How do you reckon that would go?
I think it'd be a big seller.
Be a sellout, wouldn't it, mate? They'd have to just keep stocking up. They'd have to, you know, I don't know. Hopefully, get an Australian producer of that sippy cup, you know, and Bruce Paix special. G'day there, Gail. Always good to see you on, a regular viewer as well to the show. So good to see you there, Gail. But anyway, what I wanted to quickly talk about, my friend, is yesterday. As people know, I'm a community member and, you know, SA coordinator for Australians for Better Government. So we had our event here in Adelaide at Unley. It's quite a nice day. It was, you know, we would have loved to have seen, obviously, it filled up, but, you know, people that were there was good. We had some good speakers. It was a pretty good event. A lot of people. It was really interesting, Bruce, because there was a lot of people there that we've been pushing the concept of Australians for Better Government for, you know, it's only quite new. Back in January, for 6 months, we've been pushing it. You know, obviously we've got our mission on the website. You know, some of the things are reforming the Constitution, ensuring a true separation of powers. So that's a big one, separation of powers, improving the quality of the vote, enshrining our freedoms and direct democracy, is some of the mission stuff that we're working on. But, you know, we've been pumping this for 6 months, and even people with our own community, and you know, we talk about this, you know, our bubble and talking within our own, you know, echo chambers sometimes. There was even some people that really just didn't know. They thought that we were a political party, which we're not. We're more of a think tank, a lobby group to try and get people to think about how we can improve government. And I get the feeling and idea from a lot of viewers that might be watching this content that are kind of over government, and we've talked about that before, and really not interested in it. They don't believe it's the way forward. I tend to disagree. I think we need to be looking at a lot of different avenues, whether it be the My Places, the communities, the local communities, and working behind the scenes of lots of other things. But I think if people, genuine good people, got involved more, we could possibly have an opportunity to change the structure of government. And that's one of the biggest problems. It's just it's been taken over. But one of the things that people didn't know, Bruce, is, and you may know this now, is that how many times is the Prime Minister mentioned in our Constitution?
You got me.
0 times. As opposed to the Governor General, who's mentioned in our Constitution multiple times. And the Governor General is meant to be the leader of the executive, which is the ministerial portfolios. And how many times does the Constitution mention that we're political parties in Australia? How many times do you think political parties are mentioned in the Constitution?
Yeah, because your local representative is your local representative. And yet you're hitting on a pretty good point there, because anybody looking at election advertising, it's either vote for Albo or vote for Dutton last time, wasn't it?
Yep. So it was even interesting to note that some people even at the event learned something they didn't know. And we had Dr. Christopher Reynolds there, who's a historian and a, you know, constitutional expert. He was obviously brought his book down as well and pushing that. So it was really really good to hear some of the speakers. We had Mark Aldridge and Michael Arbin and so forth. I just thought I'd make a bit of a point. Because you and I have talked about this before, and I wanted to kind of premise what I'm going to say next with, we had one of the final questions of the event yesterday, and we asked to everybody, all the panel, there was about 5 speakers, and the question was exactly that: should we have a Prime Minister in the Constitution, and if so, who should it be? so I went through a few of the speakers, and a lot of them said, look, it's either a prime minister or president. They don't really care. Obviously not mentioned in the Constitution. And we got to the end, Michael Arbin, and we know Michael Arbin. He's a great South Australian, just a real gentleman, just a really decent guy. And sort of some names were mentioned by others, some sort of popular names in our sort of centre right, sort of conservative, leaning kind of discussions. But Michael really nailed it at the end. He said, I actually don't, have a preference about whether it's a prime minister or president or which way we go, as long as the Australian people have the say. But what he said, and it was really profound. He said, the proviso I want to put on the prime minister, who do I want as a prime minister? It's actually someone that doesn't want to be the prime minister. And it was so profound. And I was like, you and I have discussed this, and this is the same with politicians. And we hear so many times that politicians go into that. And we had these discussions through our talks yesterday, and a lot of people were talking about how many of the people in our government who hold ministerial positions, they started through union factions. They might have started, Albo was involved in, the Communist Party, early links, in that, and or they were just staffers or whatever. So the people that wanted to get into politics, because as Michael said, they when they went through school, they said, I want to be prime minister. He said, they're the wrong people. We don't want people that want to be there for themselves. We want people that are going to be there for the people. So we've got all these politicians that are generally pretty narcissistic. They've got massive egos. They want to go into politics because they want to do it for themselves. It's obviously good cash. It's a lifetime kind of good pension and all that sort of stuff. But it was really interesting because we want people to represent us that actually generally don't want to be there, but they feel compelled to do it, and you and I have spoken about it, and I know your answer on this, and you've said that you definitely not interested because you said that you don't want to be telling people how to live their life. And it's exactly people like you with that mindset that actually the country needs to be leading them, because we need people that say, I actually don't want to be telling people how to live their life. We want as little government as possible. But it's exactly that type of person that we do need representing us, that actually get me out of there as quick as possible, but I'll be in there to try and make a difference for as much as I can. Not the type of people that say, I'm going to get into politics because I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Whereas you would go in there and go, okay, what's wrong with the system? Let's look at it. Let's fix what's broken and then leave people alone to live their life. Is kind of your thoughts. And I know that you wouldn't do it. You're so opposed to it now anyway. But it's your type of people, your type of thinking people that we do need in the politics. So I just thought I'd throw it out there for a bit of a starter discussion, and then you can maybe respond to what I've just said and have your thoughts and insights into it before you crack into your presentation. So what's your thoughts on sort of all that I kind of just covered there, mate?
Well, actually, while you're doing that, I just did a couple of quick searches just to refresh my memory. And George Washington, the first US president, said many times he did not want to be president, but he was the natural man for the job, having just led the armies to win the Revolutionary War. And if you Google him, he reluctantly accepted the job and got out of it after a single term, having said, I just don't want to do this. And I don't know if you're aware of this. I had a vague memory, but there was an Australian Prime Minister who voted himself out of office by using his casting vote at a vote of no confidence to vote against himself. And that was John Gorton, and that was done in 1971 when there was a vote of no confidence in his leadership. It was tied, apparently 33-all at the end of it, and he cast his vote to vote himself out of the job. So yeah, he might be the man you want in the job.
That's pretty admirable, really, because I'd be inclined if there was a vote of no confidence put up for me as a prime minister and you'd had that many people doing it, I'd probably be inclined to do the same. I think, like, it's a tough way forward when that many people are kind of against you. You'd have to kind of go, yep, no, looks like it's time to go.
And it's something that us libertarians learn, which is that we have to sit back and actually watch other adults run their lives as they want to, including making a mess of it, because that's what we would want for ourselves. And so the problem with government these days is we have this enormous nanny state that simply cannot sit back and watch people make mistakes. I mean, you've got to watch your kids make mistakes because that's how they learn. And if you don't do that, you have to hover over them forever because they never learn. They never fall off their bicycles at age 7 and get a scun knee and not do it again, because you catch them on the way to the ground. And then you've got to do that for the rest of their lives, which, of course, is exactly what we've got now. We've got an enormous nanny state who seems to think its job is to prevent us proles from making bad decisions. The problem is, who decides what a bad decision is?
Yep, exactly right. And there's so much more of that now, whether it be censorship, whether it be, banning kids under 16 and, taking over the, roles of parents and all this sort of stuff, So, yeah, absolutely. So, no, good to see. We need. So if people are inclined, and you're sitting on the fence and you feel that you're not the right person, you probably are the best person and to make a difference. And if nothing else, maybe get involved. Get involved with just have conversations with Australians for Better Government and with us and have a chat and see if we can't change it. But only way things change is by actually getting involved. So that's all I can say. So yeah. So there was a lineup of the speakers we had there yesterday. Michael Arbin, Dr. Christopher Reynolds has got a book out there, and Mark Aldridge, Councillor Henry Davis, and Stephen Tripp, who was our president. And I'm not not really getting anything from this, Bruce, but Christopher Reynolds. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but that's his book. It's probably backwards anyway, but that's a new book from Dr. Christopher Reynolds called What a Capital Idea, Australia from 1770 to 1901. He's done a lot of research, 6 years to put it all together. So if people are interested, they can check that out. I'm not getting anything for it, but I found him to be a really good speaker, and he's covered a lot of topics in regards to our constitution and how it was formed and where it's come from. So very interesting background himself. Well, there you go.
All good.
All good. 33, that number, eh? That's a high-ranking number in some sort of sect, I hear. Apparently, I don't know.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Haven't heard of Freemasonry, Bruce?
I've heard it's part of that, is it? Yep. Okay.
Isn't that the highest number or something? Anyway, there you go. Correct us if we're wrong. Correct us if we're wrong, Jason.
Obviously, outside of my area of expertise, there.
Yes, there you go. You're not a high-ranking member then, Bruce. So
I ain't a high-ranking member of anything anymore, am I?
No, well, the government's definitely put an end to that, brother, haven't they? Like in every aspect, of our lives,
and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, As I said to Danny Clark a long time ago, my circle of friends is much smaller now, but tell you what, it's high quality.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's where it's got to, isn't it? Absolutely right. And I was just going to say, I was only reflecting though. We're talking about the Liberal Party and how much they've lost. I've heard they're sort of be lucky to poll 20% here in South Australia, but I'm thinking, I'm reflecting, we've still got people like the person that actually come after you and used his powers to send the police over to you because you were writing letters to him, is still involved with the South Australian Liberal Party from what I know. So, Josh Teague still in there. There's a lot of ground to make up for the Liberal Party, and people say, Mark, they're trying hard, and Alex is trying hard to. I think you're flogging a dead horse, to be honest. I think they need to capitulate. They need to blow up. I'm sorry. I will not apologise. I said sorry, but I'm not going to apologise for continuing to hammer the Liberal Party, even though I absolutely do not want Labor ruling any further as well. But the Liberal Party has done their dash on many aspects, and I know there's some good people there. I do know that, like Ben Hood and all them are, really decent people. But a lot of these people sat there, they sat there during Marshall's reign and the stuff that Marshall put in place. They haven't been vocal in a lot of the stuff that's been happening since Malinauskas took over. In my eyes, they're dead, and I think they're bleeding members. And there's a reason they're bleeding members, is because they just haven't got what it takes to take on the Labor Party. And until the factions and the infighting and that is solved, they will continue to be in the wasteland, the political wasteland going forward. And that's just me, and I'm not going to apologise for that, regardless of how there is still some decent people within that party.
Yep, and I agree. I think it's a terrible shame that they're wasted, because I personally, after a lifetime of voting Liberal, will never vote for anybody with that branding. Even Alex Antic, who I regard as, a shining light, I've said, sorry, I'm not an SA anymore, but if I was, I couldn't vote for you because of the banner, because of the uniform, sorry. After what they did to us during COVID at both the state and federal level, never again. And I'm not saying Labor's better, but I'm saying I expect that from Labor. Liberals were allegedly small government freedom party, and then they proved they weren't.
Yep, exactly right. Yep, there we go. So back to your little slide there, brother.
And on that topic, good to see Barnaby Joyce might be jumping ship to One Nation, because, again, they seem to be emerging as the strongest freedom major. They really do.
Well, from what I hear in circles, that people that have been talking at sort of more high political ranking, he's not jumping ship, and it was really just there to put the wind up the Nationals. But that would be a nice thought.
We shall see.
We'll see. We shall see.
Don't believe anything until it's been officially denied, I think.
Yeah, well, true that. Yes, no, I agree. Yep.
So when someone comes out and says, I'm not challenging for your leadership, that means it's on. So I think it's a subset of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get back to your slides.
Good. So where we're going this week, so usual skeleton there. And last week we talked about the massive loss of taxpayers' funds in South Australia trying to set up a hydrogen plant to power the Whyalla Steelworks, which lost, I think, 280 million. Well, the Advertiser reports this week that, in fact, it lost 500 million. So it's even worse than it looked last week. But it's only OPM, isn't it, Mark? And South Australia's a pretty rich state, isn't it? You can afford to blow $500 million on this and that, surely.
It's funny you mentioned that, Bruce, because I actually mentioned that in my I had an opportunity to speak yesterday as well. And commanding the narrative, Stephen Tripp will put all the videos from yesterday up on, by the end of the week. And I actually did talk into that during my speech as well, Bruce. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to present a story. I'm not saying I believe it, but I did read a story during the week which asked why South Australia's got an algal bloom. Noted that it really started after they ramped the production from the desal plants up from idling to full on last summer, and puts forward a mechanism whereby that might have actually caused the algal bloom. Now, I'm going to show you the story so you've heard of it. I think the evidence is a bit thin at this stage, but the obvious thing is, let's say it really was the cause. This is a too big to fail story, so there's no way they're ever going to tell us that it really was the cause.
No, they're not going to admit it. No, and I did an article on that. Would you believe? I don't know if you saw that. You must have missed that in your inbox.
That might be a pre-gazump.
I better shut up then, hey?
All right, what else have we got? We got bird flu raising its ugly head halfway to Antarctica on Heard Island, which is a bit of a problem because how did it get there? And we're going to have to expand those range circles, the kill zones around chicken farms. I think previously it was 10 or 20 kilometres if you had bird flu in a chook shed. you had to sort of wipe out all the sheds around it. Well, if it can obviously travel 3,000 kilometres across Southern Ocean, it sounds like the first time we get a shed affected in Australia this season, we're just going to have to wipe out every shed in the country.
Yeah, maybe that's the aim, Bruce.
Yeah, maybe. Sorry, don't give them ideas. Edit that bit out.
Oh,
Edit it out.
bloody hell. You know they're listening, mate. The spooks are listening. You know that, don't you? So.
And you and I bounce off each other quite a few times during the week. You know, they're watching the show. So, yeah, I think a lot of people do watch the show.
Yeah, exactly. Is that a gazump for Jason? We know the chicken didn't fly there.
Yes. Now, second thing in the health story, I'm just going to present a study which asks the question whether statins might actually prevent dementia. And that's interesting because the basic mechanisms and stories I've heard suggest that, if anything, statins cause dementia. But this study questions whether they might be beneficial. I'm going to present it because it's a classic example of fraudulent science. Because first off, it's a modelling study. They haven't collected data. They've just assumed that statins prevent vascular disease. And then they've modelled how much dementia will go down if that's true. Well, questions as to whether that's true. And they're using a surrogate marker there because what we care about with does a drug cause dementia is does a drug cause dementia, not does a drug change some third-party marker and then say that that's related. And we saw that during COVID, of course. What we wanted to know is, do the vaccines prevent COVID? They didn't tell us that. They just told us that they created antibodies, which is not the same thing. So this is another example of that old playbook.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do a bit of an analysis of the old tobacconist fire problem in Australia, and you probably noticed that there have been literally hundreds of tobacconist shops burnt down in the last several years, including one just down the road from where I live here in Western Vic, so they even got the local tobacconist. And that's a problem that's been created by government action. So they've ramped up the tax on ciggies to the point where it's worth organised crime importing illegal ciggies and selling them. So the product is now so valuable that organised crime's got interested. And of course, all these tobacconist fires are just turf wars, you know, different bikie gangs or crime gangs fighting for their market share. So anyway, the government's going to fix that. Rather than saying, "Oop, we did it, we'll fix that," they're actually going to introduce a new scheme, a new police task force to look into it.
Wow. Well, they're going to create a tobacco buyback scheme and put bins like machete bins in Victoria, Bruce. What do you reckon? Do you reckon they've got the money for those? How much money do you think they'll have to spend on those?
Is it actual money or is it OPM?
It's probably, well, it is. It's OPM. Yeah, that's right. It's fabricated money. Yeah.
Mind you, cigarettes are pretty valuable items these days. The tax alone on what they call a stick, a single ciggy, is $1.50 plus GST. Did you know that? On a single stick.
That is absolutely crazy. I remember buying a packet of Peter Jackson 15s for 75 cents, I think, when I used to smoke.
When my first job, but way back when I was in about year 10, is I used to go down to the local Shell station at Tranmere at 6 in the morning and open up and, get the station running. And then at 8 o'clock, I get on my bicycle and go up to school. So I had the first 2 hours getting the oil out, getting the dips red, getting the pumps ready. And most mornings there'd be a couple of desperate cigarette addicts waiting for me to open so they could get into the shop and buy their packet of Trent Reds or Marlboros or whatever it was. And back in the day, a cheap packet of ciggies back then was in the 90-something cents. Now, if you're a rich mother, you wouldn't buy the cheapies. You'd buy the king size Marlboros or Winnies, and they'd be a lot more expensive. They'd be like about $1.12 or $1.17. So what's a pack of ciggies now? It's like $50 or $80, and most of that's tax.
Oh yeah, well that's right. So we can't attribute that to inflation. That's just pure greed from the government. It's like,
yeah, correct. Well, for irazicahide, it's for your safety.
For you, yeah, that's right. Absolutely right. And you were saying, so libertarian kind of concept, Bruce, and see if I've been listening to you long enough now, 80 episodes. It's kind of going, well, let you smoke. If people want to smoke, let the free market do its thing. And if you get cancer, like if we know it's proven to be cancer, then your insurance possibly should be higher, or your medical costs should be higher. Is that kind of where your thinking is?
Yeah, well, the problem's yours. And in fact, I did see an analysis years ago which debunked the whole idea that smokers cost a lot more, because smokers on average die earlier. So, yeah, they have more health costs, but they're upfront costs. And let's pick a number. Let's say they die 7, 8, 10 years earlier than the average non-smoker. They're not getting a pension for all that time, are they? So I don't necessarily buy the argument that, well, we've got to tax smokers because they cost us. Well, maybe they don't. And even if they do, they only cost us if we choose to pay it. You know, if we don't pay for their healthcare, if everybody pays for their own healthcare, then you get the consequences sheeted back to you.
Yeah, and you'd be able to afford to pay your own healthcare if we weren't taxed 50 cents on the dollar.
$1.50 per ciggy, by the way. Yes. You'd be able to imagine. So you could put $50 or $80 a day into your healthcare fund, couldn't you?
Yep.
All righty. Now, what else we got? We got a miscellaneous section, and you would have seen during the week, Albo finally got his meeting with Trump, and one of the take-home video clips was Kevin Rudd getting a bit of a smack from President Trump. And I'm going to look into why he got the smack and also whether he's forgiven, because Albo basically said it was all just a bit of banter and it's all good. But I don't think it is. I think Trump is a narcissist who doesn't forgive anybody who said bad things about him. And I think Albo and the Labor government have left Rudd as our ambassador in Washington as a deliberate FU to the Americans, because they're not ideologically linked. And I think that's a very poor decision for the people of Australia. You know, might make Albo look good amongst his base, but the world is a changing place, and America has shown the ability to reach out and discard long-standing relationships and, for example, put punitive taxes on Canada. So I think us poking that bear at the moment is a very bad idea. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Zombie stories. And speaking of poking bears, back to the South China Sea, more interest there. And the gender gap story has risen again. Not quite a pay gap, but apparently it's a superannuation gap. So we're going to talk about that. I've got a new segment there. That's the Mythbusters segment, because I discovered today, to my shock and horror, that the whole Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner thing is based on a false premise. And in fact, coyotes are more than twice as fast across the ground as roadrunners. And that whole cartoon story was not based in fact. And I use that as a kick-off to say that, you know, there are things we get exposed to as kids, cartoons or other things, which we just accept. And we go through our entire life never questioning them. When in fact, maybe they got feet of sand there. And look, I question everything these days, but who'd have thought that the Roadrunner really should have been caught by Wile E. Coyote and eaten, you know, in the first episode?
Wouldn't have made good TV then after one episode, would it? Like, show me the money.
And we're going to finish out with some Muslim bird stories, and a whole lot of them, actually. There's quite a few in there, mainly based around academic gobbledygook, with Peter McCullough's site publishing what they said is probably the most ridiculous academic paper of all time. And I'm going to follow that up with 3 examples from my son's graduation at Flinders in 2019. I'm going to show you 3 of the theses from the social sciences department that were awarded PhDs.
Wow. Okay.
So that's where we're going.
Yeah, sounds good. And just while you were introducing there, it was Gail made a good point, because I think like the nicotine or cigarettes in the old days, I'm just not sure whether it's because they started lacing them with chemicals or putting other stuff in it, like the actual tobacco itself, whether it's, I mean, you may have done a bit more study on this, whether, in the old days, whether it was as dangerous as what it was over the last 100 years, who knows? I mean, tobacco's been around, those sorts of things have been around for a long time, haven't they?
Yeah, and I've done a bit of a dive in. I wouldn't say a deep dive, but I've done a little bit of a look at nicotine as a therapeutic, and that's one of the themes. Is one, nicotine is not an addictive substance; it's the other stuff that is, and two, that it's beneficial. So, and yeah,
And Nick
noticing what
mentions
it's there. Yep, that's
yeah,
well known. That is well known. Yep,
interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, there you go.
Yep, that's right. So I wouldn't disregard that. And again, that's just something we've been told forever. I don't doubt that smoking is damaging. One of my jobs as an anaesthetist was to assess at a glance your physiological health before I took over your physiology, before I gave you an anaesthetic. And I got very good at guessing your age, your weight, and whether you're a smoker just by looking at you. And I would say I was usually correct on smoking 80, 85% of the time. Even on quite young women, like I would often say to 23, 25-year-old women, okay, so tell you're a smoker. And they go, how do you know? And I say, well, it makes you look older, which is exactly true. It does. The disease emphysema occurs when the elastin, the protein in your tissues that gives you tone in your lungs. When cigarettes break that down, your lungs expand and lose surface area. Well, you're elastin in your skin too. And if you see people who've smoked for 20 years, they look older than their years, and that's because they're more wrinkly. So that's part of it. Now, again,
You're right there, Gail.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's not always. Yeah, once they're stripped down in their hospital gowners, that may not be quite so easy. But yeah, that's right. Yeah, and just on that topic, so a bit of a diversion. But when I was a junior doctor at Modbury many years ago, if you got captured into the medical system, say you broke your ankle and you got sort of swallowed up into the hospital and you were stuck there for 5 days while you had your ankle operated on, and before you got out. If you're an alcoholic, they would take away your booze. And we would know that by about the second or third night, that person would go off in the ward. They'd become demented or disoriented because they were withdrawing from alcohol. They weren't there to do that. They were there because they'd broken their ankle. We had control over them. They couldn't get away. And even though we knew we were going to get trouble with the DTs, with withdrawal, we wouldn't give them booze. We would give them benzodiazepines or some other sedative, which isn't what they were withdrawing from, isn't what they wanted. And they were adults and they weren't in hospital to come off their booze. They were there because they got a broken leg. And I used to think that was stupid because, one, I guess even back then it offended my sense of personal autonomy. And secondly, it just created more problems. You give a person who's withdrawing from a drug and delirious a different drug, so we've got to deal with that as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And same with cigarettes. We didn't want you smoking inside the building, but we progressively pushed the smokers further and further away. So you're sick, you're in hospital for who knows what reason, and you see many a patient get themselves in a wheelchair in their flimsy gown with the bum hanging out at the back and wheel themselves out to wherever the designated, smokers area out in the street was. And you'd see them all gathered out there, smoking. And again, may not be great, but you know what? They're not in hospital to give up smoking. They're there because they've got a broken leg or they're getting cancer treatment or whatever. And they're adults. And if they want to do it, it's not my business to say that.
Yep. No, fair call.
All right. Oh well, let's get into it then, eh?
Yeah, we're cracking on. We're going
How
to be
much have we
cracking on.
padded it out so far? Is it half an
Well,
hour?
we've padded it out by 40 minutes, mate. So it'll be before we even start on the first slide. We've done well, but it's been good conversations, and we've had some good comments in there too. So that's okay.
Yeah. Well, and we get these little sort of diversions from the comments, don't we?
And we do. And when they're from Olga about good to see you yesterday too, Olga, at the event. And yes, sugar and cigarettes is addictive. There we go.
All right. Okay, let's kick on to the not easy being green. And as mentioned in the intro, last week we said that they'd blown $285 million of taxpayer money trying to set up a hydrogen plant to run green steel at Whyalla. And I went over some of the physics that meant that was always going to be a batshit crazy idea. Even if you ignore the whole premise, which is we need to do this for the environment, which we've discussed extensively, I think that's all a con. But if you really needed to do something other than burn coal to make your electricity, you're not going to make a hydrogen plant because that's untested. Well, it's not untested technology. It's tested and failed technology.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it turns out the 285 million that was apparently blown on that was actually an underestimate, with the South Australian Auditor General saying it's actually about 500 million of opium that's been peed up the wall there for that.
$500 million, just what we need for our ongoing state debt and budget, eh? For nothing, for naught, and they reckon they're going to get a bit of money back from the generators or something. But yeah, put it on Gumtree.
Fortunately, South Australia is a very rich state, and they can just absorb this without noticing it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, right. Yeah, good on you.
And I mentioned this story in the intro as well, so I'm going to talk about this just because it was an interesting idea. Like I say, personally, I think the evidence is a bit thin. But this story asks whether South Australia's baffling algal bloom has actually been caused by the desal plant.
Mm-hmm.
And it notes that the Port Stanvac facility was built nearly 15 years ago, just in 2011. But really, since then, it only ever operated in idling caretaker mode at 5 to 10% capacity because it wasn't needed. Despite what Tim Flannery said about us all running out of water in the next couple of weeks. In fact, there really wasn't any need for desalinated water, which, by the way, is very expensive because you're turning electricity into fresh water, basically. So the plant hadn't really done much until autumn of 2025 this year, when they cranked it up to full capacity after a pretty dry summer. So first time they ever ran it in full capacity was this summer, basically.
Yeah, yep, pumped it right up.
And 2 months after that, the algal bloom started. So the proposed mechanism is that when you desalinate seawater, you get some fresh water out of it and you get some hypersaline water out of it. And rather than just dumping the very salty water back into the sea, they mix it and dilute it to prevent local ecological problems with it. So they have jets, they mix it around, they stir it up. And this story questioned whether the effects of that process, the mixing process, was stirring up seabed algal spores, nutrients, etc., and was the cause of this algal bloom. So I think there's not a lot of evidence behind this. It's a theory, and I'm not saying it's the case, but it's an interesting idea. And experts in this story talked about this algal bloom, and we've just said that maybe it's the whole decarbonisation efforts, that have caused this. But the experts have said that we need to accelerate those decarbonisation efforts because ocean warming was an important contributor to harmful algal blooms. So if it's actually true that our environmental causes, because remember why we built these plants. One is because they told us it would never rain again. And two, it's because they wouldn't let us use the most efficient means of storing water, which is dams.
Yep.
So instead, they forced very expensive programs to make it out of seawater, which is normally only done in places like Israel or the Persian Gulf, where they just don't have a choice. They can't put dams in because they don't get enough rainfall anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
what if the experts are wrong and the algal bloom is not being caused by ocean warming, but in fact is being caused by their attempts to protect the environment? Worth asking, isn't it? Because they don't know what the reason is at this point.
A bit of that happening too, isn't it, Bruce? Because I mean, we talk about the environment and how many birds got killed or how many koalas get killed for the, sake of these for the sake of these wind farms and panels and all that sort of stuff. So it's the same old story, isn't it? So, but yeah. But anyway, here's a sheet that was sent through. So this was the actual numbers. So November Tuesday ramped it up. See, February 7,000 litres, 5,000. So this is where it ramped up, and that's obviously where it started kicking in. Then obviously when it come out, they throttled it back again. But it's worth noting. This little thing here says, as I've shared this before too, is that this was a Paul Van Ruth summary and conclusion. This is an EPA study. May promote blooms of harmful toxic algae species, which have been identified as components of the plankton community. So anyway, so that's fair bit in there. So I hope I didn't gazump you further on that.
No, you've added. That's great. So experts 15 years ago said this might be a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, funny
no
about
one
that,
could
isn't
have
it?
predicted this.
No one could have
predicted this. No.
No. And if people are really interested as well, there's a self-plug there. I did this Substack as well on it as well. Fish kill and Adelaide desalination plant, 50 dot points of various issues. So this was sent to me and I'll put it up there on my Substack. So if people are interested to check that out, it's called Fish kill and Adelaide desalination plant if people want to have a bit of a squiz on that. And as I said, I'm not saying it is or it isn't either, but it's worth looking at all the evidence.
Yeah. The experts are probably already saying that it isn't. Like all things,
So.
the desal plants are a monument to environmental stupidity, and that's baked in. You can't question that. That's heresy.
Yep. How dare you?
Right, let's kick into the health section. So we've got this story where bird flu has apparently appeared on Heard Island. And that's a huge problem because how the hell did it get there? Heard Island is actually in Australian Antarctic territory, even though it's actually closer to Madagascar than anything. So the nearest significant land to Heard Island is Madagascar, which is 3,000 plus kilometres away. And it's in fact 4,000 kilometres plus from Australia. So if bird flu has appeared on Heard Island, how did it get there? And we've been told in the past that bird flu outbreaks in Victoria have been caused by migratory ducks travelling between China and Antarctica. So why does this matter? This matters not because there's a huge poultry industry on Heard Island, because it illustrates the utter futility of trying to control bird flu outbreaks in commercial chicken sheds by killing all the chickens within a certain radius. And we've seen that in recent years where you get a positive PCR, that old chestnut, in birds that aren't sick in a chicken shed. They keep swabbing them till they get the answer they want. Then they kill all the birds in the shed, and then they often kill or quarantine surrounding sheds for a few tens of kilometres. So the problem is this: if bird flu can travel 3,000 kilometres across ocean, how big is your range circle got to be next time we get a chicken shed affected in Victoria or South Australia? Isolation isn't going to work, and mass culling isn't going to work because it travels intercontinentally. And Ted Steele, who I think you've had on the show in the past, he's got another very interesting theory. He believes viruses can travel intercontinentally in jet streams. It doesn't have to be flown there by a bird. And if he's right about that, then obviously, viruses can circulate everywhere. And I certainly thought that was true at lesser distances. So during the COVID era, I likened COVID aerosols to cigarette smoke. They're basically so fine they can float anywhere. And in fact, they are. They're a tenth the size of smoke particles. So the whole idea that being 2 meters or an adult kangaroo away from somebody or a moose if you're in Canada would protect you is batshit crazy, because the smoke can drift long distances. Which also meant that locking us up indoors was the worst thing to do, because that's where the smoke concentrates. The reason that pubs have beer gardens is because there's always air movement outside, and the smoke, the particles just disappear.
And I like catching up with Dr. Ted Steele. It was a really good conversation, and to me, and it might not be, but if you think of just the concept of air, what happens when you heat air? It rises, right? So, and then if you cool air, it lowers. So if you consider that up in the jet stream, you've got these little particles floating around, and then look, people often get sick in winter, right? So air cools in winter, so it drops down. So these particles are floating low in the atmosphere, and it just kind of almost makes sense, right? When you kind of talk about that.
And if you want to go one step further, one of Ted's theories is what he calls astrobiology. So he believes that viruses can actually travel between planets. And he notes the fact that historically and in the Bible, plagues have often followed comets. And he just asks whether, is that because the virus was seeded into the atmosphere as the comet either went past or fell? And we know comets give off dust. So, again, I don't know enough about it to have a critical eye on it, but it's an interesting possibility. And if it's true, all of the ridiculous short-range so-called control measures, masking, distancing, etc., they're all utterly useless, and they were useless. They didn't work.
That's right. Yep, exactly.
Anyway, Ted Steele, Australian professor, shunned by the scientific community for wrongthink. So, in my mind, that's a badge of honour for Ted Steele as well.
Absolutely, you can definitely check him out, Ted Steele. If you put Ted Steele into Rumble, you'll see plenty of interviews with Ted there as well.
I imagine you won't find him on YouTube.
No, I get pinged off YouTube. I'm lucky to keep our shows up on YouTube, to be honest. But anyway.
Or I wonder if you put Ted Steele into YouTube, you probably get like a pre-bunk, where the first 10 hits will be explaining why he's an idiot. So.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's pretty much how it works. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So here's the other story from the health section. So this story, which is only during the week, raises the question as to whether popular cholesterol drugs, statins in other words, may help prevent dementia. And I use it because, like I say, it covers some of the usual tricks for presenting dodgy health science. So first off, what did they do? This is a modelling study. So the research simulated the effects of cholesterol lowering drugs, and then assumed that lowering cholesterol is a good thing, and then said, okay, based on that, we can prevent dementia. So not only is it a modelling study, it doesn't use real data, but it used an assumption, which is questionable, that lowering your cholesterol lowers your vascular disease risk, and used that as a measure. So they used a surrogate measure that's not do you get dementia or not, but rather does your cholesterol change or not. So a lot of flaws in the study. And we saw exactly this during COVID when they couldn't show that the vaccines worked. So they instead just showed that, we get, you take your booster and your antibodies go up. Okay, well, that's a surrogate measure. I don't care if your antibodies go up. I care whether it actually worked. And in fact, as we showed, if you produce the wrong sort of antibody, you might actually find that your antibodies going up is a bad thing because it, in fact, increased your risk of COVID. So watch for that. Watch for that. Now, the journalist who wrote the article obviously didn't do much of a Google search, because there are plenty of studies out there that actually suggest the opposite, such as this very large study, I think it was 100,000 plus people, where they looked at the risk of a dementia diagnosis in the year or so after starting statins. And they, in fact, found that the risk of getting a dementia diagnosis was ramped up by 46% in the year after. Now, it appeared that that effect decayed somewhat over time, but this study at least is saying, well, hang on, there's evidence that statins cause dementia. And I have personal experience with this through a friend of mine who was badgered into taking statins by his GP, and found within days that he was incompetent at work. And he worked as an engineer. And he had enough presence of mind to think, hey, something's not right here. So he stopped his statins. And the GP, like a good GP, said, not a problem, that wouldn't cause it, but let's give you a different statin. So my friend was put on a second statin, having had a career-ending potential side effect from the first one, and immediately got the same problem again. So he stopped his statins and didn't go back to them. And in fact, there are reasons there are mechanisms by which statins could mess up your cognitive function, because your brain is a great massive lipid, which includes cholesterol. And cholesterol's in every membrane of every cell, and it's one of the important signaling things. So messing up your cholesterol metabolism could well affect the function of the organ that's full of cholesterol more than anything else, your brain. So rather than just having a modelling study that says, well, if you take cholesterol-lowering drugs, well, that means you won't get dementia. What about if we actually look at, if you take cholesterol-lowering drugs, do you get dementia? That might be a better study. And like I say, it's being done and there are questions there. And in fact, if you look at it, the top two prescribed drugs in Australia are both statins, Crestor and Lipitor. So of the top 10, there are literally millions of people in Australia on statins to lower their cholesterol. And as I said, cholesterol is a vital molecule. It's in every cell in your body. And your body isn't making it for nothing. It needs it. You know, evolution ruthlessly prunes out anything that's not useful in your body, and in particular, anything that's bad. So the reason your body makes cholesterol is because it wants it. And to think that you can just bugger that up by giving blockers, which block production, seems to me a very bad idea. And in fact, if you want to know a bit of history, the first statin was actually synthesized, I think it was either from a moss or a lichen. And the reason that this plant made statins was to poison the deer that ate it by messing up pathways in their liver. And that's true of most drugs. You know, why does the poppy plant make morphine? It's not to give you a painkiller. It's to put you to sleep and stop you eating it. Why does the bark of the cinchoka tree make aspirin? Well, it's not to take away your headache. It's to give you a bleeding problem if you eat it, or some grazing animal does, and make it sick. Why do the tea plant and the coffee plant both independently invent caffeine? Not to give you a stimulant beverage, because both of those things are poisons. And in fact, you can sprinkle coffee grounds around your garden and it'll kill slugs and snails. Now, we take it at a hopefully less than lethal dose, but the point is made. So almost all drugs are poisons. And if you think you can take a poison that poisons your liver and stops vital metabolic pathways, then you're bound to get problems that come from it. And I think that's why you get so many side effects of statins or any other drug. So now I said they're the top 2 most prescribed drugs in Australia, and I just listed the other 8 just in case you're interested. So going down the list, numbers 3 and 4 are both acid reflux drugs. Now, I used to have acid reflux and pretty much went away when I stopped eating highly processed muck and carbohydrates. So those are dietary things. Prendipril, which is a anti-hypertension. Again, I think most hypertension is, again, due to poor diet, carbohydrate intake. It's not until we get to 6 that we actually get a short-term drug. So Keflex, you might just take for a week for an infection. Then you got 2 more chronic use drugs, metformin for type 2 diabetes and escitalopram for depression. Number 9, amoxil, and finally another antidepressant. So of the top 10 drugs, there's only 2 of them that are short use drugs to fix something, and the other 8 you're meant to take forever. So, and that's a metaphor for modern medicine, isn't it? A drug for life, preferably more than one.
Yeah, well, the only one that they haven't bloody mass-produced and used is marijuana. It's bloody matzophytes, as Wayne threw up. What about marijuana? They bloody pushing back hard on that bloody thing. That must be the health effects of that, Bruce.
And I don't discount that. And again, I haven't done a deep dive into it, but there are many people who cite significant health benefits from what they call medicinal marijuana. We know it's an appetite stimulant, the munchies. And other people find it useful for seizure disorders and inflammatory disorders. But that would obviously impede on the pharma model, so they don't want that. And I wonder whether it's the same thing with nicotine. There are a lot of people nowadays using pure nicotine in patches for a variety of chronic illnesses and reporting good effects. So again, the easiest way to get nicotine in the old days was to smoke, and what is it? It's $1.50 now a ciggy. So again, if you were to speculate that maybe the drug companies were cracking down on any, call them natural alternatives, well, the evidence perhaps supports that, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. I wonder what the sort of animals that got deterred off of marijuana planting, they walk around totally smashed. And it's a bit like when they say koalas are usually off their face because they're eating so many bloody eucalyptus leaves or something, they're permanently stoned or something like that.
Yeah, well, and pandas, they're not great thinkers, are they?
That's it. Yeah.
Anyhow, if you look at the history of health in Australia and all Western countries in the last few decades, one of the epidemics that's appearing is dementia. There are vast numbers of dementia patients at the same time as we're giving vast numbers of vulnerable old people statins. Is it causative? Who knows? I'm sure the experts have said that it's not. They probably can't tell us what does cause dementia, but I bet, like vaccines, they can tell us what doesn't.
Yep.
And as we've said before, Bradford Hill says, correlation doesn't prove causation, but there's a whole lot of ways whether you can tease out whether it's likely. So don't just be shut down by people saying correlation doesn't equal causation. No, the real quote is correlation doesn't prove causation, but there's a whole lot of ways where you can look at whether it's suggestive or not.
Well, they use that just as much as they use the safe and effective, don't they? Correlation doesn't equal causation is rolled out just as much as safe and effective. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. And if you start saying Bradford Hill, they'll never have heard of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, here's another interesting contrast. So this 2021 study told us that Africa was largely unvaccinated and yet seemed to have less trouble with COVID than anywhere else in the world. So low vax rates in Africa appear to be correlated with low COVID loads. And that contrasted with this story that I saw in the media yesterday, where this woman who'd previously been touted as being one of Victoria's oldest COVID survivors, because she had survived COVID at age 94, the pictures of her being wheeled out of the hospital after having survived it. Now she's just turned 100. And they mentioned at the party that not only was she one of the state's oldest COVID survivors, but they said that not only that, she'd survived COVID 4 times. So she'd in fact had 4 bouts of COVID and was still alive. Now, here's the interesting thing. She obviously lives in a care home. And from what I can tell, her first bout was in 2021. So vaxxers were coming out in 2021. So the next 3 must have at least been after the vaccine rollout. So it would appear that she's had COVID another 3 times despite being vaccinated. I mean, you can almost guarantee that she's fully vaxxed because she lives in a care home and she's had COVID before. So how is it that almost nobody in Africa got COVID when there were no vaxxers, but she got it 4 times, despite almost certainly being jabbed to the eyes? Maybe she wasn't up to date.
Maybe not. Maybe not. They'll roll that out as an example of how safe and effective they were, Bruce.
I would say ineffective, given the number of times.
Yeah. True that.
Back in the day, you were supposed to not get the illness that you were immunised against. The word immunised means immunity, doesn't it? So if you still get it after you've been given the immunity shot, then it didn't give you immunity, did it?
No, but that wouldn't have played into the the ability to set up a multi-million-dollar plant or multiple plants in Australia that manufacture vaccines and mRNA products.
Yes. Yep. Righto. And a bit on that topic, poor old Dr. John Campbell has just posted that he's got COVID again and he's medium sick, he's febrile and moderately unwell. And he's angry about this because for those, I'm sure most of us have watched John Campbell's journey from the retired nurse educator who just wanted to do the right thing. So he was all for masking and getting your jabs and all that sort of stuff. And he used to present scientific papers weekly during COVID, and his channel grew from 100,000 to millions, and he managed not to get censored off YouTube, probably because he was just like your elderly grandfather. He was just a sweet, sweet guy. But to watch him gradually wake up to the fact that the things are dangerous, he got a vax injury himself, and that they don't work, and that the studies were fraudulent, was a real painful experience to watch, because he was just a genuine guy, and to watch him work out that it was all a lie was very, very painful. And there you go. I don't know how many bouts of COVID he's had, and I don't know how many jabs he's had because he doesn't elucidate, but he said he's got COVID again, so it's at least the second, and he admits that he's had multiple doses of the vax and got a vax injury. So, again, safe and ineffective. Well, we don't even know if they're safe.
Yeah.
So, poor old Dr. John.
It's a constant journey, isn't he, from where he come from? It's he's definitely evolved a lot from watching his journey.
Yep. Yeah, poor guy. All right, let's flick over quickly into finance. Real money news, because gold, silver and Bitcoin are real money. Government money. Dollars is not real money. It's not money at all, actually, if you listen to Mike Maloney. So during the week, gold and silver both retraced a bit, and that's no surprise because both of them had absolutely stellar runs in recent weeks. And in fact, both gold and silver are up about 50% on the year. And Bitcoin also went up a little bit, 3%, and it's up 9% on the year. Well, been up and down there. So I've said many times, you can't safely store your wealth in government money because it's a bleeding asset. They print more and more of it all the time, and it loses value. So you need to look for other forms of private money, and gold, silver, and Bitcoin, I think, are all of those.
Interesting. I'll just put that comment up from. I think you and I talked about that anyway. Is this, that everything is labelled COVID-19 now, right?
Yep.
Whereas we used to call it like a flu or a sniffle or a bug, but they've really just really hit this really hard, this marketing campaign. So every time someone gets a sniffle now, oh, it's COVID-19. I used to remember we'd go, oh, I've got a bit of a bug, I've got a wog, or I've got a whatever,
Yep.
right? And that's what you call it. But now they've reframed everything. So everything someone gets now when they're a bit run down or whatever is, oh, I've got COVID-19. Yeah, geez, It makes you sick.
And the funny thing is, like, I've seen this in neighbours, like they go, oh, I got a bit of a cold, but I did a COVID test and it's not that. So if it's COVID, you got to hide, pull the curtains, put your head under the covers. But if it's the exact same illness, but the test was negative, no worries, just go on with your life, which of course is how it should have been. So
yeah, exactly right.
Exactly how it should have been all along. A positive test is not a disease, to quote a now vanquished doctor.
Exactly. Loans aren't really, Aussie Truth Seeker, loans aren't real either. They come from fraction banking. People are working, paying for nothing. People's properties are tokenised. Rent, tenants, not owners. Yep.
And that's right. So when you take a loan out, in the olden days, the bank had to attract depositors to put their money in the bank by offering them decent interest rates. And then they would loan your money out at a higher interest rate, and that's how they made a profit on it. And that kept a balance between borrowers and depositors. They don't do that anymore. They're not interested in depositors. You get virtually nothing on money you want to put in the bank, and it'll go backwards at 10% a year due to inflation. And banks don't have to bother with that, because you're right. They can just, when you take out a loan, at the moment your loan's created, they just type the numbers into your account. It's not real. They weren't put there by depositors. And this has allowed governments to artificially drive interest rates lower and lower and lower, which means people can borrow more and more and more, so they're in debt for their entire lives. And the other people get hurt are the people who are trying to make a living by depositing money and getting interest on it. There's no interest to be had. They can't do that. And very few of them have enough financial savvy to know that, okay, you've got to get out of that financial system and put your money in places where that doesn't happen. Gold, silver, Bitcoin, for example.
Just as an example. Yep.
All right. Now, the ever-popular government overreach section. Nothing there this week. I haven't seen any government overreach for months, Mark.
Not like every single day, every single second.
Sorry,
there's me, mate. There's our illustrious Labor leader that's running for re-election on March next year. So yeah.
And this is a story that illustrates two things. One is government overreach, and also how good intentions can have bad outcomes. So in Australia, there's been more than 200 tobacconists burnt down in recent years. And the reason for this is because governments slapped ever higher sin taxes on cigarettes, to the point where it's now worth crime syndicates importing ciggies from overseas and selling them under the counter without the tax take. And just to show you how much the tax take is, as you and I mentioned, when I was at school opening up the service station, a pack of smokes was $1. During the early days of COVID, my two elderly neighbours locked up in their house and scared to go out, back in the days before they worked out it was all bullshit. One of them was a smoker, and he said to me, a bit hesitantly and a bit embarrassed, next time you're in at the shops, would you mind picking me up a pouch of cigarette tobacco? And he should have known me, because I said, yeah, sure. You're an adult, you're allowed to smoke, I'll do that. So he did that, and I went into the tobacconist, and he handed over like a pouch, and it was over $100. And I went, "Is that right?" Because going back to my service station days, a packet of pouch of tobacco was like $6 or $8. Well, now it's over 100, and that's because of taxes. And similar applies to cigarettes. So the $1 pack when I was working my first job, pack of 20, is now like $50, and 70% of that is government taxes. And in fact, each cigarette is taxed $1.50, more than their whole pack used to be. And then there's 10% on top of that. So you've got a tax on top of a tax. So the little small pack is, $40, and a 50 pack could easily be $100 for a pack of smokes. So this was all allegedly done for your safety, for erysiperidine. The nanny state said smoking is bad for you, so we're going to nudge you and make it harder and harder, and you'll probably be a good person and give up. Now, some people don't give up, but they have to pay vast amounts of money. So $30 or $40 or $50 a day in cigarette tax. And so if you're a crime syndicate and you can import cigarettes from overseas, straight away, $50 a packet is your potential profit. Give some of it back to the smoker, but it's a huge amount of money and it's worth doing. So in the olden days, this never happened. But now that there's so much money to be made in it, the crime syndicates are doing it, to the point where my research said that half the cigarettes sold in Australia now are so-called illegal ciggies. Half of them. And the only thing illegal about it is that they've not paid excise duty when they were imported, because they were smuggled in. And that must be a hell of an industry to smuggle that much product into the country. But yeah, apparently half of the cigarettes sold in Australia now are these illegal ones. And it's a $10 billion industry.
Yep.
And this has incentivized crime gangs to do this. Import ciggies, avoid paying the taxes, sell them cheaper than the government ciggies, and still make a huge profit because of that. So the government's good intention, putting a sin tax on these dirty, dirty cigarettes, so as you stupid adults who still think smoking's a good thing, we put taxes on it just to convince you that it's not, and, ratchet them up every year just to convince you that it's more. But what we've got here is classic unintended consequences, because what's happened is the government's tax take has fallen because half the cigarettes bought now are not taxed. And the other thing is they've created an enormous crime problem with literally hundreds of tobacconist shops being burnt down as crime gangs fight for territory. So what's the government's response to this? Instead of going, we stuffed up, too much tax creates a crime market. No, they're going to add in a new layer of bureaucracy, which is a tobacco task force to crack down on this.
That's Labor in a nutshell, isn't it? Continue to grow the bureaucracy, and so more money goes to that. So it means they have to have more excise tax. They don't want to lower it because it's going to pay for that new bureaucracy, Bruce. Geez, they're good at this sort of stuff, aren't they? Anybody think they've got a bloody PhD on ripping people money off? So
government creates a problem. Government then introduces a new scheme to address the problem, which will probably also create a problem. And yep, you're right about beer. Like I haven't bought a pint in a pub for ages, but it is shocking how much
beer excise. It's ridiculous, absolutely. Yep.
So in a complex system, they've done something and they've expected one outcome. We put the price of smokes up, so people will smoke less. But no, they've got a completely different outcome. They've got people are getting their smoke somewhere else, and as a result, hundreds of tobacconists are getting burnt down in the crime wave that follows. And This reminds you, do you remember the old nursery rhyme about the woman who swallowed a fly? There was an old lady who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed a
Yeah.
fly. I guess she'll die. So what she then did is she swallowed a spider to take care of the fly.
Mm-hmm.
She swallowed a spider that wriggled and tiggled and jiggled inside of her. And it went on and on and on. So there was a problem with the spider. I got was it a mouse or a bird or something? It just went on and on and on.
A cat, and it's a mouse, and a cat, and a dog, and yep.
Now, this wasn't a nursery rhyme. This was a description of how government works. You get a problem. The program to address it creates a bigger problem, which spawns a new program to address it, which creates a bigger problem, etc. ad infinitum. And this is why government just grows and costs more and achieves less. It wasn't a nursery rhyme. It was a metaphor for how governments work.
Yes, and you can sort of tell that, Malley must have some global kind of globalist influences. He's got some handlers because he's really going the full stick. He instigated the under-16s things, which the federal government adopted. He's pushing a lot of things. He's going for the COP31 conference here in Adelaide, which is the big climate scam junket thing. So I reckon he's got some backdoor kind of globalist strings happening there, Bruce. Malley's come a long way since his SDA days and other things.
Yeah, he sure has. And no one could have predicted this moment. We actually had a precedent for this because back in the 20s, the US had an experiment with prohibition. They decided that alcohol was bad for you, so they made it illegal in most, if not all, US states. Now, people didn't just go, oh, it's banned, I won't do it. They went, I want my drink. So they were prepared to pay for it. And because it was an illegal product, the organised crime went, okay, we'll move into that market, we'll take over and we'll make big profits out of it. Far more money made selling a illegal product than a legal product. And we see this with fentanyl and heroin and illegal drugs. And when I was an anaesthetist, every patient I saw got 100 of fentanyl at the start of their anaesthetic because it's an airway suppressant. And that was like 50 cents or something. But on the black market, that might be $100. So back in the day, the US made alcohol prohibited. And so the mafia moved in, and this was one of their major funding streams, one of their major businesses that allow them to grow. Now, the Australian government hasn't done quite the same thing with cigarettes. It hasn't prohibited them, but it has made them prohibitively expensive, which effectively is the same thing. And created exactly the problem that we could have predicted if we looked at the history of prohibition 100 years ago. But apparently this time it's supposed to be different for some reason.
Yeah, well, you look at history, they don't know, and their handlers purposely don't look at history because it just wouldn't suit the narrative, Bruce. Too many people would wake up and go, hang on a minute, we've been here before. Let's stuff that up. A bit like socialism and communism and Marxism, and we're kind of like walking head first into that because they don't want to talk about that.
And I'd forgotten that, but this is why they don't teach history, because they don't want people know. One of the big things that I credit with me waking up early to the whole this is a con during COVID is I've just seen this movie played multiple times in the past. And you might remember the old Split Enz song, "History Never Repeats."
Yeah, good song too.
But factually incorrect. History always repeats. History always repeats.
Yep. So start blinding people to what occurred, and you just they walk straight into it again. Just better marketing techniques and strategies these days.
Now let's move into the MISC section. And during the week, Albo finally got his meeting with Mr. T. And you might remember that televised conference rapidly turned into a bit of a smack for Australian Ambassador Kevin Rudd. And Trump seemed to simultaneously not know who Rudd was and also say that he'd never forget. So what was all that about? Well, Kevin Rudd's got form because between the first and second Trump presidencies, Kevin Rudd was our representative to the US government in America. He was our ambassador. And he stuck the boot in multiple permanent forums. So here's one thing he said about Trump. He said he was the most destructive president in history. This is relating to his first term. He drags America and democracy through the mud. He thrives on fomenting, not healing division. He abuses Christianity, church, and Bible to justify violence, all aided and abetted by Murdoch's Fox News network in America, which feeds this. So our ambassador Rudd was already on the record during the Biden term as this is what he thought of Trump. Now, he also called Trump the village idiot and a traitor to the American people. So when the Trump administration, the second administration came in, any sensible Australian government would have replaced Kevin Rudd as ambassador. Because, trust me, Trump will know that this was said and he won't forgive and forget. But what happened instead was that Albo just left him in place. And Albo and Rudd used to work in the same office, by the way. They know each other personally. So Albo chose to do a favour for Kevin Rudd rather than do his job for the country. So we've had an ambassador in the US, in Washington, representing Australia's interests to the Trump administration, who's on the record as saying all of those things. He should have been replaced at the first opportunity.
Yep.
So this was the first opportunity. This was the first meeting, and it came up at the meeting pretty quickly. And so Trump stuck the boot into Rudd and basically said, I don't like you, etc., etc. And Albo tried to make light of it. Albo basically said it was just a bit of banter. And in fact, Rudd and Trump met off camera, afterwards, with no witnesses. And, had they made up on it. It was just a bit of banter, no hard feelings, etc., etc. No witnesses to this being said, by the way, but this is what Albanese represented to us. Now, do you think one of the world's great and most powerful narcissists, Donald Trump, is he the sort of guy to forgive and forget a nasty little rodent like Kevin Rudd saying those things about him?
Unlikely.
Do you think? And in fact, it's not happening because pretty much straight away this story followed up, which says Donald Trump says he does not forget when people say bad things about him. So there was a follow-up question a few days later, and Trump's admitted. So we're now in a position where there's open animosity between the Australian ambassador and the US president, at a time when the US are making enormous changes in world relationships with their allies. You'd be aware of all of the tariff talks. And Trump this week slapped an extra 10% tariff on Canada because he didn't like their use of a Reagan advertisement from the 80s, which he felt misrepresented the American position today. So Trump immediately said, okay, extra 10% tariffs for you. And that's Canada. They've got a border in common with the US and massive amounts of trade between the two countries. So it's pretty clear that Trump is prone to suddenly imposing penalties, even on staunch allies like Canada and Australia, if he feels that he doesn't like the cut of their jib. So we've got an ambassador in Australia who's openly disliked by the US president right at the time when there are very important things happening there. And this is a catastrophe that's going to affect Australia.
Yeah, it didn't seem to hurt him bloody signing up for a lot of our bloody minerals though, didn't they? And something to do with our bloody our superannuation funds as well and people's money.
Yep. Yeah, and you'll find that America will get more out of that deal than we will.
As always.
And the so-called AUKUS subs, they'll be getting our super funds and our rare earths within a month, and the subs won't come for 10 years if you're lucky, if at all.
It's like every time it's not, everything's done not in the best interests of Australians. They've done it for decades. They've sold us down the river.
Yep, that's right. And it was all just nepotism. So Albo should have sacked Kevin Rudd day one. He failed to do so, which means he's favouring his personal relationship with Rudd over the entire Australian people. Thanks a lot, Albo. Thanks a lot.
Yep. And consecutive before him as well.
Now, here's another story with Albo's ugly mug on it. And this is from the Advertiser. And it says that a poll recently done has shown that 95% of Australians want a return of manufacturing to Australia. So 95% say they want manufacturing to come back.
Bit of a theme at our conference yesterday too.
And now the problem is they're not going to get it. And they're not going to get it, as Andrew Hastie and others have pointed out, because our current electrical green dream prevents it. So here's what Hastie said. Aussie energy prices are way too expensive for us to be globally competitive. Energy is expensive because of Labor's climate obsession. Now, that's 100% true. We've discussed in the past. Australia is at the far end of the earth for any of its markets, apart from local markets. So anytime we want to sell products anywhere else in the world, we've got a huge penalty to pay in shipping. It costs us to get stuff there. And for the last 100 or more years, we've offset that shipping problem with a cheap resources and cheap electricity solution. Because we have abundant coal, we had cheap electricity, and we had all of the raw materials here. And throughout the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, we had a manufacturing industry. It's all gone now. And it's not coming back because the key resource is energy. Whatever else you need to make stuff, you need energy. As Chris Martinson said, it's the master resource. And our wise rulers have destroyed our cheap energy, our cheap electricity, on purpose for ideological reasons. So there's no way manufacturing's coming back because we can't do it with expensive green electricity. It's just not possible. So I don't care if 95% of the people said they want manufacturing to come back. It's not coming back.
It's almost like it's all by design, Bruce.
Now, on the other hand, of course, you'll still get your Aboriginal voice to Parliament with 30% of people wanting it. So,
or 65% of South Australians that didn't want it, and they still get it.
Yep. Well, we're just going to do it anyway. Just do it anyway. And back to the energy story. So Christopher Martinson here said two things about world economies. He said, one, energy is the economy. So whatever else you need to make stuff, have an economy, you need energy. And if you haven't got cheap energy, you haven't got a productive economy. So that's one thing. And the second thing Christopher Martin said is there is no such thing as a high income, low energy country. They don't exist. So we are going to be a low energy country because we're making our energy expensive, which means we can't have as much as we used to have. So Australia is going to start dropping down that curve to being a poor country again. So we're not going to get manufacturing back, and we are going to get more and more poor because of government energy policy.
Yeah, it's not going to change because, our political system allows destructive Labor to come in at 32% of the vote.
Yeah.
And have the most seats in Parliament. It's just the way it is.
Now, if we want a heads up on what all this looks like, we only have to look to the motherland, look to Britain. because this story in The Guardian said that net zero, the same as Albo's policy, is killing British manufacturing. And we're talking about manufacturing. And this story says that output last year in Britain was at its lowest level in 35 years. And the reason for that is net zero.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we only have to look at Britain and Germany to know what the end result of what our wise rulers here are doing. We are going to be poorer and we are not going to make anything.
Yep. Yep. And we just don't have the population. And because we don't have housing, and we're already paying everything too much. We don't have the infrastructure, don't have the hospitals, nothing.
Now, the Brits are onto it, of course, so they've got a solution to this destruction of their manufacturing due to green energy policies. And here's their solution. Quote, manufacturing is buckling under sky-high energy bills. Time to closely regulate price gouging gas plants or take ownership of supply. So that's pure communism. So you blame the energy producers for the high prices. You call it price gouging, and you regulate them. So that's price controls. So instead of letting the free market set the price of energy, the government's going to set it. And they'll set it low to keep people happy, and the producers will go out of business because they can't produce it for that. And then the government will take ownership of supply. In other words, the means of production. So that's pure communism. That's price controls and government control of the means of production. That's straight out of the communist playbook.
Yep.
So Britain's going communist and we're following along.
Yep. And good old Mally's, spruiking about bringing the public transport back into government hands, the buses and the trams and all that sort of stuff.
Yep. Yep. Well, that's what Labor always does, isn't it? All right. Zombie stories that do not die. The good old gender pay gap is rushing back at us with this story, which was from Channel 9, which raised the old gender pay gap again, but in a slightly different form because it was talking about superannuation here. Now, I didn't read the story because I already know what it said. It would have said, women don't have as much super as men. This is unfair. This is due to gender discrimination. We need some sort of program to fix it. I guarantee you that's what the story said. But if you want to dig into that a bit, and we have in the past, that cannot be true for a couple of reasons. One is because there is nothing that allows it in the legislation. So we've had a compulsory superannuation scheme for, I'm guessing, 30 odd years now, which started low and then cranked up to 12% now. And here's what the legislation says employees are entitled to. So it's 12% if they're aged 18 or over. It's 12% if they're under 18 and working more than 30 hours a week. And it also applies to contractors. So they're the people who get the 12% super, employees, or contractors. Is there anything there about sex or gender?
Well, of course not.
So if there's a gender pay gap, it's not caused by any sort of inequity in the legislation. So if every worker is getting 12% of their pay as stashed away for super, then the only way women can have less is if they're not getting paid as much, and that generally means because they're not working as much or not working in jobs that are as remunerative. And once again, I guarantee you that what the story will say is there's a gender pay gap and women don't get paid as much. Super. Straight away contradicting themselves because woman is not a gender, it's a sex, adult human female. And if it really was a gender pay gap, then why are women so stupid that they don't just identify as men and level up?
They've got that opportunity these days, don't they?
So, yeah, that's every time you see gender gap for something, understand it's not a gender gap, it's a work gap. There's no provision in the legislation that allows differential pay rates for men and women. And even if there was, men and women are sexes, not genders. So it's all over the shop, this argument.
To shoot a port side there, I know that they usually come up with the argument is because obviously, in a lot of family cases, the wife, the mother, doesn't work for however many years they, raise the kids. So the, husband obviously has the opportunity to get the, super and that, and then that he has a big super balance, which is meant to be there for both of them as a whole family. But these days we have so many breaking up and families breaking up, marriages breaking up, then it always goes to dispute in courts about, the wife not having, having access to the super because they didn't have the opportunity to get to build up super while they were not working, but they were raising kids. And there's all this other sort of argument that comes about from that.
And you make a good point. If you look at the unit being the family, not the individual, it all smooths out. And superannuation is a shared asset. So if a marriage breaks down, the man doesn't just wander off with all his super. That is a asset with a dollar value on it, which goes into the pile. So he might walk away with all his super, but she walks away with a house. So no, it's a shared asset and it does get divvied up if there's a property settlement. Yep.
Well, it's just sad that these days more and more families are breaking up and relationships don't last, but it's just the world we live in.
Yeah, well, look at all the pressures on the family unit being attacked from all directions.
Yeah, and a lot of it caused by government.
Yeah. Well, the government is competing with the family, aren't they?
Yep, exactly right.
All right, second story that will not die, and it's the old South China Sea thing again. So during the week, Australia went back to provoking the Chinese in their backyard by flying a surveillance plane, a P-8 Poseidon, around the South China Sea. And the story said that the location was over the Paracel Islands. So this Google map shows you where the Paracel Islands are. So it's right in the middle of the southern South China Sea there. And that might look like it's a significant distance from China, but in fact there are multiple Chinese islands in that sea, which means in fact the Paracel Islands are only about 400 kilometres from China, and they're about 4,000 kilometres from Australia. So again, I've got to ask the question, who thought it would be a good idea to provoke China by doing this in their backyard, bearing in mind how we felt when they sailed a task force around Australia? And even if it's legal, I don't know if it's legal, it doesn't matter because the Chinese are upset about it. So the Chinese have said the Australian actions were a violation of sovereignty. Look, I don't know if they were, but they were definitely provocative. If the Chinese sail the warship 400 kilometres off Australia, we would feel anxious about it. If they put a surveillance and intelligence gathering aircraft to fly along our coast 400 kilometres out, we would be very touchy about it. And the other thing we got to worry about around Australia's coast is New Zealand. In contrast, the South China Sea is militarily sensitive. There are multiple territorial disputes there involving the Philippines, Vietnam, China. So it's a very contested area and it's irrelevant, the legality of it. The fact is the Chinese are our largest trading partner. They take 40% of our exports and they give us 20% of our imports. And we are provoking them in their backyard. So I ask again, who thought this is a good idea? Why are we doing this?
Yeah, it almost makes you wonder whether it's just done to create articles to keep people living in fear and keep this whole tension of Australia, China, in the forefront, and so it distracts people from all the other stuff that's going on and that they're doing.
It could cause us immense damage because the Chinese are also a bit Trump-like. They will, at the drop of a hat, just cut trade. They've in the past said, right, Sheep trade stopped, not taking any of that.
Mm.
Your wines, not
Mm.
taking any of them,
Yep.
which then causes massive problems in Australia. So,
Mhm.
yeah, why are we doing this?
Mm. Yep. Yep.
Yep. All right, what have I got here? This is a new segment. This is the Mythbusters segment, because I discovered today that the whole Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner thing is based on a fraud. It's based on a misconception. Now, for those of us who are perhaps too young to remember what Wile E. Coyote was about, let's just bring him up.
Mm. Remember sitting down and watching them as a young lad. Meep, meep. Meep, meep. Meep, meep. Meep, meep. Oh, memories. Gail wasn't a fan.
So the premise there was that poor old Wile E. Coyote was always trying to catch and eat the Roadrunner, and he had all these great schemes for doing it, all of which were failures. But he was forced to do it because the Roadrunner was too fast. He could never run it down and catch it. Well, I discovered just today that that's not actually correct, because in fact, coyotes are more than twice as fast as Roadrunners.
Mm.
And in the real world, they do catch and eat them.
Mm.
So I've spent my whole life believing that Roadrunners are too fast for coyotes to catch.
Mm.
And it's all false. It's not true. And
it's like
what's
safe and effective.
poor old Valerie, that you're right. Now, were you just generically frustrated, or did you actually do a fact check and go, well, hang on, there's a false premise here? But
Yeah.
here's my point. We all grew up with knowledge that was just handed to us, and we never questioned it. I never questioned until today whether a Roadrunner was faster than a coyote.
Mm.
And how many other things have we just been told and accepted because we saw them as kids? And I could list any number of them. So, why do we put shoes on horses?
Mm.
You look in the Adelaide Hills or the grasslands of Victoria, there's horses in paddocks that have got shoes on. And every 6 or 8 weeks, the farrier comes along, takes the shoe off, trims the foot, which is like a fingernail, because it hasn't worn down, because it hasn't been in contact with the ground, and then nails the shoe back on and then goes away with $200+ in his pocket. So what the hell was the purpose of that? And yet everyone knows horses get shot. Well, why do horses get shot? Because going back centuries, in Europe, when horses were pulling carts around cobblestone roads in cities, which were very abrasive, and then going back at night to be in a stall all night because it was cold, not out in the field, they were stuck in a little box with manure and urine on the floor, which softened their feet, and then they go out the next day and work on the cobblestones again. So back in hundreds of years ago in Europe, horses being used for draft purposes in cities got excessive footwear. Now, fast forward several hundred years to now, to the other side of the world, to a completely different use, we're still doing the same thing, despite it staring us in the face and saying, well, hang on, the foot needs trimming because it didn't wear, because the horse wasn't walking around naturally wearing it. And yet All we do is we ring the farrier every 8 weeks and give him $200. Something that, you always do what you always done. You always get what you always got. Nobody ever notices. It's a case of the fish doesn't know that he's wet. Always been that way. So nobody says this doesn't make sense. And I just thought that was a beautiful example. And I do that more and more. When given a premise, I often say, just wonder if that's correct. And in the past, we've talked about Christmas holiday road tolls. We all know that Christmas is very dangerous and everybody dies on the roads at Christmas. And like 15 years ago, I went, I wonder if that's true. I'll pull some numbers. And in fact, it's not true. You're about 5% less likely to die on the roads at Christmas than any other time. And yet everybody in Australia knows that, except it's all wrong. So, don't just accept things that don't seem to make sense, because maybe it's because they're not sensible.
Yes, and they love to use modelling and data and numbers, misconstrued for their purposes, very much so. And was it from Mia Laz, is the point of the opposite of the Chesterton's fence concept?
Now, let me think. Chesterton's fence is where it says basically before you pull down the fence, ask why it was put up. And this is, before you continue on with the fence. Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, I'll take that. Mia. That's correct. Yeah. Question why the fence was put up and ask whether you can take it down. Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you. Somebody, Mia, you've obviously been watching the show. Thank you very much.
Yep. Tweet the horse I cry when racing horses. Yeah, there's a lot of arguments for that too. I'm not a fan of horse racing myself, but dog fighting, cockfighting, all that sort of stuff. Not a fan.
All righty. Now, to finish out, we've got some Uslam. We got a lot of Uslam this week. A very great amount.
Wow.
So, to start with, there was this story from Switzerland where apparently a Swiss man has been convicted of hate speech, and his crime was to say that the skeleton reflected sex, not gender.
Funny about that.
And in fact, he said it in a hateful way. So what he actually said was, if you dig up LGBTQI people after 200 years, you'll only find men and women based on their skeletons. Everything else is a mental illness promoted through the curriculum. Now, for this hate speech, he got a knock on the door from the police. And the police said that he had been engaging in hate speech and publicly belittling comments based on sexual orientation under the Swiss Criminal Code, and he was convicted and fined 500 francs. So, first off, my first question is, to have a crime, you have to have a victim. Who's the victim? Is it one of the skeletons? Now, the second thing is that he was publicly belittling comments based on sexual orientation. Well, again, we're getting ourselves all confused here, because what the story said is that the skeletons reflected gender. So do they reflect gender or sex?
Well, they have to reflect sex, Bruce. There's only two sexes, male and female. It's binary.
So now I heard an interesting thing the other day. So if the world is split into binary and non-binary, that's two categories, which is binary. All right. Anyway, our poor friend in Switzerland has said that he's not going to pay the fine, and so he's going to go to jail for this hate crime against skeletons.
Wow. They're ridiculous. How crazy is the world getting? This is where it's all going. It's just like absolutely ridiculous.
Hence the categorization of the story.
Muslim bird of ridiculosity.
Righto.
Of course, it's getting madder and madder.
Now, if you thought that was a one-off, so this story is from John Leake on Peter McCullough's site. where they published this and they said this is possibly the worst ever published peer-reviewed scientific article. And it's called Glaciers, Gender and Science, a Feminist Glaciology Framework for Global Environmental Change Research.
What the heck? What does that even mean?
Yeah. Now, just because clearly you don't understand what it means, let me just flesh it out for you. So
I'm a simple guy, you know that, and the audience probably gets it, but I'm pretty simple.
Here's the abstract. And remember, the abstract is the paragraph at the start of a scientific paper, which basically sums it up. So here's the abstract to explain to you, you uneducated peasant. Here's what that's all about. So abstract. Glaciers are key icons of climate change and global environmental change. However, the relationships among gender, science and glaciers, particularly related to epistemological questions about the production of glaciological knowledge, remain understudied. I'll bet they do.
Oh.
This paper thus proposes a feminist glaciology framework with 4 key components: knowledge producers, gendered science and knowledge, systems of scientific domination, and alternative representations of glaciers. Merging feminist post-colonial science studies and feminist political ecology, the feminist glaciology framework generates robust analysis of gender, power, and epistemologies in dynamic social ecological systems, thereby leading to more just and equitable science and human-ice interactions.
Holy shit, Bruce, I'm more confused than I was when you first mentioned it, mate.
You want me to read that to you again? Pay attention. I'll read it to you again, Mark.
I think if you read it to me 100 freaking times, Bruce, it still wouldn't make sense to me.
Now, I'm a bit worried about that last bit. They want more just and equitable science and human-ice interactions. That almost sounds a bit kinky to me. Is that the new furry? Is it? Is that icy? Is that a new gender, perhaps?
I don't know. I really don't know. I'm gobsmacked. I'm gobsmacked. This is
now. Just in case you think that's a one-off, it's not. And it even goes back to your home state of South Australia, because in 2019, my son graduated from engineering at Flinders. And when I went to the graduation ceremony, it was a combined ceremony for some reason between the engineering faculty and the social science faculty. So in addition to clapping when he got his master's in engineering, I got to listen to some of the other gems from social science that were being awarded at the same time. So I kept the program there from 2019 because there were some bits of it were just so good. And unbeknownst to me, I'd kept them for now. So I'll just give you 3 examples. So here's for admission to the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. So that's a higher degree. You know, every time you see somebody calling themselves doctor this or that who's not a medical doctor, well, they're probably a PhD. Okay,
Yep.
So in this case, so here's what it said in the program. Creative artifact, the best of both worlds, an eco-feminist science fiction verse novel exegesis, patriarchal planet, celestial ceiling tropes of the female astronaut figure and models of maternity in science fiction space narratives. So that's the title. Now, again, given you're a peasant, I'm going to read you the explanation because that's the bit below it. Using a science fiction novel in verse and an exegesis, this research explored the modes through which female characters, particularly mothers, are configured, framed and mobilized in contemporary fictional narratives set in space. The thesis widens the space for women in space.
Warning, Will Robinson. I can't say Will Robinson because that'd be male then, wouldn't it? So I'd have to, I'm going to get slapped for that. Because,
Now, if I can just do a little summary of the summary there for the rest of us peasants. So this person got a PhD for writing a novel about women, especially mothers in space. And you notice that word there, exegesis. I saw the word exegesis multiple times in these gobbledygook social science papers. So I thought, I've got to look it up because I've never heard of that word. Okay. Now, the reason I've never heard of that word is because it doesn't bloody exist. Because there's no R in it. It's exegesis.
Okay.
And I looked at multiple online dictionaries and none of them had an R in it. Okay. So they've got a spelling mistake in the explanation for the PhD, right? And in fact, twice, because it's up there as well. So they've got a PhD for writing a feminist space novel with spelling errors in it. Anyway, what is exegesis? It's a word that means to critically examine a text. And it's usually applied to things like the Bible. You know, you critically look at what does this paragraph mean. So that's what an exegesis is. All right. And by the way, I thought, okay, how important is this area? So I actually asked the Wikipedias, how many women astronauts have there been? And according to Wikipedia, 12% of the 875 humans who've been astronauts, and that means to go into space as a crew member, not as a tourist, like, is it Britney Spears or whatever? So 12% of them have been female. And of that 12%, 7% have been mothers, either before or after they went to space. So that's right. Less than 1% of astronauts have been mothers. So it does seem to me like this is a rather niche topic for a PhD, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just got to, did you bring that up before? I rather like that. Hang on, not that one, that one. Yeah.
Exegesis. Sounds a bit like extra Jesus. Yeah. I don't know.
All right. So
good use of words there, Jason.
In case you're wondering, okay, how do we monetize this? What is the practical use of a eco-feminist science fiction novel as a basis for a doctorate? You know, what are you going to do with this for the rest of your life, I guess, is the question. And in fact, apparently there is a practical use for it because Dr. Lovell, for a doctor she is now employed as a lecturer at the University of Adelaide. The University of South Australia. Now, presumably they're mentoring other doctoral students in how to write eco-feminist, space novels. So, yes, perhaps there'll be a professorship in it.
Well, could be. They might do it. Very much so. Could be a PhD. Wow. It's amazing what money will pay for, eh?
Yeah, I don't think you'll find this person working in private industry too much. And furthermore, given that the bio includes the compulsory acknowledgement of country for the Aboriginals, I bet what she's currently doing is working on a postdoctoral thesis about the contributions of Aboriginal mothers to space exploration. And I think that is valuable because that's a topic I haven't heard about. So I think it is time that was brought to the public's attention. I can't wait.
Well, true. I'm happy for you're happy for taxpayers' money to go towards that. Well, universities are funded heavily by us too, aren't they? I don't know. Where do they get their money from?
Right, so. All right, but there's more, I'm afraid, Mark.
Of course there is, but wait, there's more.
Professor Dr. Mothers in Space wasn't a one-off. So here's some more gobbledygook about hypermasculinity in the online metal scene. So this thesis offers an innovative investigation of hegemonic masculinity and how it is configured in the online metal scene. What's the online metal scene, Mark? I didn't dare type that into my computer. Can you just?
Well, I'm just Well, my mind straight away goes to heavy metal, as in metal music. Is that kind of what it could be referring to? I don't know. Have I got that right?
I didn't dare type it in because I was a bit worried I'd end up on a list.
Probably would have been.
So apparently the research demonstrates that the affordances of online communication permit the emergence and maintenance of hypermasculinity.
Mm. Mm.
Now, I don't know if that's good or bad.
Well, I don't know either. I mean, maybe if you had read the thesis, Bruce, maybe, you know, I don't know.
Now, finally, this is the third PhD thesis, and this is equally incomprehensible. But this is apparently about the limited success of the use of Japanese fashion as a weapon in Australia.
Mm.
So it's titled Contemporary Japanese Fashion as a Vehicle of Cool Japan, a Case Study of Soft Power in Australia. And the explanation, this thesis analyses the influences on Japanese fashion in Australia that position it as a potential vehicle of soft power. This thesis will assess the soft power potential of Japanese fashion in Australia, ultimately concluding that Japan's soft power has had limited influence in Australia.
Mm.
So that's a bit of a downer. Apparently, Japanese fashion cannot be weaponized in Australia.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, there you Oh my gosh. Wow.
Now, I
I wonder
won't
if these
torture you.
I wonder if they actually self-fund themselves through this, you know, because you know that there's a lot of university, you know, you get your HEX debt and all that, and then people, you know, we know the stories of, you know, perpetual academics, you know, rack up the HEX debt and all that sort of stuff, and you start paying it back after you earn a certain amount of money. But obviously, we know that's not true because Albo likes to pay off a lot of HEX debt at taxpayers' expenses. So you just wonder whether they're self-funding a lot of these PhD courses, or whether the Australian taxpayer is actually contributing heavily towards these doctorates, Bruce.
I imagine they'd be on some sort of grant scheme, wouldn't they?
Some sort of grant, yeah.
So I won't sort of indulge you with any more of those, but all of this perfectly illustrates, by the way, why once technical, modern, functional societies like, pick a Western country, England, Germany, Australia, New Zealand, France, Canada, it explains perfectly why they are rapidly falling down in decay. Because we are turning out doctors of fashion and eco-feminist space novels, not engineers. So much so that this story told us that the word of the year a couple of years ago was enshittification.
It's an interesting word.
And it describes that whole process of society crumbling as we're seeing around us. And here's what it says. We're all living through the enshitocene, a great enshittening in which the services that matter to us, that we rely on, are turning into giant piles of shit. Author Cory Doctorow said earlier this year.
Well
and
done,
it is. This
Cory.
is why nothing works anymore. Because we are funding doctorates of this garbage instead of STEM subjects and giving them professorships and equal weights and jobs teaching more people in university about this gobbledygook.
Yep. Yeah, it's well, far out. That is a real eye-opener, and imagine how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these sorts of things are going. Yeah.
This was, Mark, this was just an incidental finding at a degree conferring ceremony that was, I went to see my son get his engineering degree. This was the other half of the degrees that were given, and there were others, and I only put the most ridiculous ones out. I mean, there were the usual range of PhD minutiae, you know, like the life cycle of the dung beetle on the western side of a steep hillside in, you know, northern Papua New Guinea. that's fine. You expect that sort of, micro focus in a PhD. But, look at the first one. Not only was there a PhD given for basically writing a feminist fiction novel about mothers in space, of which there have been almost zero, but that person's then kicked onto a lectureship at a real university and calls himself doctor.
Yep, and pushing out more and more doctors. It is over.
That's over.
All the people attending early.
It's over. We lost. Humanity lost. Start again.
Well, it's not humanity. It's the West. I couldn't imagine Xi Jinping teaching this in China or Putin teaching this in Russia and North Korea or any of those sort of countries, and probably not those countries that have happily declared Christianity now. I think Poland or those countries. It's really just the West, isn't it?
Sveta in Russia would be doing a PhD in astrophysics, not in feminist mothers in space.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to go cry in my musket, I think.
Yeah. Well, you better take the sippy cup lid off, and that way you can get a good slug of it.
Yeah.
But anyway,
it's over.
Just so you know, and I think it was Gail that did actually say yes, but I did find it for you, Bruce. Online metal scene encompasses a variety of online communities and platforms for discovering music, connecting with bands and musicians, and engaging with fellow fans. So there you go. Filled you in. I thought it had something to do with the heavy metal scene.
Was the word exegesis in there?
Yeah, no. Extra Jesus. Yeah, good on you. That's kind of stuck in my head now. But these people are probably getting paid a bucket load of money. This lecturer at the university, and here we've done a 2-hour show. We should maybe we should be charging more than zero. For the knowledge brought by Dr. Bruce Paix. I don't know. What do you reckon?
Well, I don't have a professorship anywhere, do I?
No, that's right. You haven't. Yeah, boy, you bought your PhD. Maybe you can think about it, Bruce. You might have to go back to university. What do you think you'd do? Just throw it out there. What do I know?
I don't have a doctorate. I have 3 bachelor's degrees in medicine. I'm not even a real doctor.
Apparently not. Well, it's never too late to go back to university, Bruce. What would you do? What would you major in? What do you get your PhD on, Bruce? What do you reckon?
I think if you were listening to those 3 theses, it's way too late to go back to university. It's over.
Yeah. No, I think you'd be kicked out in the first semester, mate. Absolutely, you'd be out of there. God love you, mate. All right, good on you, Cobber. Thanks again for bringing all your amazing content. And as I said, we may bugger all out of this, but it's fun. You enjoy bringing the content, and I really love hosting it and having a bit of a yarn for a couple of hours on a Monday. And we've got some great people that come along every week, so makes it all worthwhile, brother, doesn't it? Makes it all worthwhile.
And buy your Blue Bee sippy cups.
There you go. It could be out there. Let's put a petition into Michael to get on the Blue Bee sippy cup, the Dr. Bruce Paix Cafe Locked Out, musket saving, keyboard saving, sippy cup for Dr. Bruce Paix. Yeah, good on you, legends. Good on you, everybody, for joining in and sending all your comments through the chats. Really going off these days. So good on you guys. God bless Australia. Take care.
Take it away.
To fight again for that already burned, it was driven towards the flames. All the signs are there for all to see, the signs we've lost our way. When we jail our heroes and applaud our villains and turn our hearts away, like a silent choir, too scared to sing the anthem of a braver day. A song our children may never hear, the ballad of Dr. Bruce Paix. A song our children may never hear. The Ballad of Dr. Bruce Paix.